current capacity. A lot of pupils transit from basic to secondary, and from secondary to senior secondary level. And we at one point expect that the transition should continue from senior secondary to tertiary and higher education. So we want to set the stage to ensure that we have the capacity to respond to the demand.
The validation of the document is regarded a giant leap by the Higher Education Ministry. Reporting for GRTS News, I am Fatou Janimbai.
We now take our first break. The news continues in a moment. The journalists were arrested on Sunday after authorities accused them of being members of the now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. The news channel, as we hear in this report, is accused of being partisan.
The Qatar-based TV network were arrested on Sunday in Cairo. The authorities are accusing them of belonging to the Muslim Brotherhood, which was banned last week as a terrorist organization. One was released, the other three are in temporary custody.
We would like our colleagues to be released immediately from custody in Cairo. They are journalists simply doing their job in Egypt, reporting on a variety of stories from Egypt, reporting all sides of the story from Egypt.
The journalists were arrested in a hotel where they were staying for work. Al Jazeera no longer has a permanent office in Cairo. Police closed it down on the 3rd of July, the day President Morsi was ousted by the army. The arrest of Al Jazeera reporters coincides with the Egyptian government's intensified clampdown against the Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is often blamed for supporting the organization.
In spite of the fact that Jazeera has vulgarized its track record and has become partisan and part of the ongoing struggle in Egypt right now, and they're siding with the Muslim Brotherhood, however, the state is not justified in what happened today or in any of the harassment that has happened to this station recently.
Today, Egypt, along with Syria and Iraq, is reportedly one of the world's most dangerous countries for journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists denounces the arrests. They are targeting journalists and closing a large number of media outlets that the government considers are not representing the political or editorial line that should be followed according to the views of the Egyptian government. Al Jazeera has hired lawyers in Cairo to try to obtain the release of its journalists.
Extreme weather conditions have hit parts of the U.S. The situation, which has resulted in the cancellation of more than 15,000 flights, is expected to last for days. CNN's Laurie Seagull briefs the elements to show how hard hit these areas are.
To pile up here on Cape Cod as fierce winds, frigid temps, and coastal flooding threaten residents of the beachfront homes. Eastern Massachusetts is expected to be among the hardest hit, with blizzard warnings in effect in some areas through the morning. But it's not just the snow that's a concern. Limited visibility is making driving conditions treacherous.
We're on the road. It's about 6 p.m. We're about an hour and a half away from Cape Cod, and we're seeing the first signs of the storm. You can see the ice forming on our windshield right here. Temperatures dropping pretty rapidly. We actually just passed 2 accidents. Another car pulled over trying to scrape that ice from their windshield.
Into the night, crews out in full force plowing roads. Emergency services on call.
Stay inside and, stay safe. Don't be out on the roadways unless it's necessary.
Sparks flying off power lines, and crews are on the ready to respond to outages when the storm passes. As much as 2 feet of snow could accumulate overnight, with wind chills dropping well below zero and winds whipping at gusts up to 35 miles per hour.
Right now I'm holding up our wind meter. We're looking at gusts of wind up to 20 miles per hour. It's only expected to get worse. That's why you see these streets are empty. Everybody is at home weathering the storm. As you can see, conditions have worsened. I've got this wind meter right here. You can see the gusts of wind blowing. Right now we're looking at about 20 miles per hour. It's been higher, and conditions just continue to worsen.
The U.S. has announced that it will be pulling out more staff from its embassy in the South Sudanese capital, Juba. UN troops are trying to restore a sense of calm in the capital, but as our Damon reports, that would be no easy task.
To the recent outbreak and fighting, the United Nations was not patrolling like this in the streets of the capital, Juba, nor was it in most parts of the country. In fact, the United Nations was seriously considering refocusing its mission, focusing more on development. That is how optimistic people were about the prospects for this country. But now that has all changed.
So our focus was really shifting in line with the situation we thought prevailed and that we were seeing in South Sudan. And it is almost unimaginable what has struck this country during the past 3 weeks.
We're heading towards one of the neighborhoods that saw some of the worst violence. We were down there a few days ago and it was almost completely deserted. Part of the aim of these patrols is not just securing the local civilian population, but also trying to rebuild a sense of confidence amongst people that it is safe enough for them to go back home.
I want to know that there's no problem. Okay. Thank you, my brother. Okay.
In 10 days, everything can okay. Everyone can go back home.
The neighborhood down the road does still remain fairly deserted, but out here we are seeing more open shops, more activity in the streets, and members of the UN team trying to engage the population. These types of interactions are especially critical at a time like this.
There are sharp wounds that have been opened, and I think it will take some time to heal the ruptures that exist. But again, it depends on what we're talking about and where. There really are differences across the country, and just as things unraveled very quickly, it is possible that things can come together again. I have to be a believer in that as well.
This is one of the UN compounds in the capital, and even though the situation outside its gates is, relatively speaking, fairly safe, even those who do leave the compound during the day tend to come back at night. But the main issue for the UN is not necessarily protecting those civilians that have managed to seek sanctuary within its various bases across the country. The key issue is the tens of thousands of civilians who have not made it to UN bases, who are believed to be hiding out in remote corners of the country, out in the bush, without access to proper food, clean water, or medical care. And the longer this drags on, the more dire the situation for the civilians will become. Arwa Damon, CNN, Juba.
We now take our second break. And before we take leave of you, a quick reminder of the day's top stories. The new WHO country representative, Dr. Charles Sago Moses, has presented his credentials to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as he is poised to consolidate the gains scored in the country's health sector. Extremely harsh weather conditions in many parts of the United States have resulted in the cancellation of thousands of flights, leaving stranded passengers in a nightmare. And the Al Jazeera News Network is demanding the release of 4 of its reporters being detained by the Cairo government for alleged links with the now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. That was all in this edition of the news. Thanks for your time, and do stay with GRTS.